Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. Here's your host, Trevor Sharon.
Thanks for joining us. This podcast was actually originally released as a broadcast on a local radio station here in Colorado Springs. Dr. Mayfield and I invited our friend, Mr. Will Luden III, to come in and talk about political homelessness. Mr. Luden runs a blog and a podcast under the name of Results with Reason that can be found at resultswithreason.com. We really enjoyed this conversation and wanted to release it on our podcast as well. So let's dive right into this conversation.
Will, you and I have met quite a bit over coffee, and I've really enjoyed our time together. And one of the things that has come up often in our conversations is just kind of the state of our political scene in America. And I know you and I have gotten into conversations around, how do we decide who we vote for? And it's almost like, the lesser of two evils. And I was just fascinated by the term that you brought up, I don't know, probably about a month or so ago when we were meeting, or maybe even before Christmas, about this idea of political homelessness. Can you walk us through a little bit about what that looks like and how you've conceptualized that and kind of begin the conversation with us this morning?
Well, of course, Mark, and thank you. The genesis, this has been evolving over the years. Who am I politically? Who do I line up with? Who do I like? And I used to see the world as left, middle, and right. And more I didn't like what was going on the left and the far left. And there are a lot of things that I'm equally uncomfortable with on the right and the far right. And in the middle always looked like, squishy stuff. Who wants to be in the 6 and 1, half a dozen the other? I really don't care. You pick for me middle, right? Mm-hmm. And then I remapped that whole diagram, and it dawned on me that I really was politically homeless. I'm not unaffiliated. I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Libertarian. I am wandering in the desert, pulling my thoughts together, and I love it that there are people out there like you with Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield and others trying to sort this out almost with a clean sheet of paper.
I know we've pulled out a lot of clean sheets of paper at our meetings, just trying to figure this out. And it's when we talked about this at the first time, I walked away going, that makes sense. And that's why it's so hard, in some ways to go and vote, even though we need to. But what do we do with this? I think this is a good concept, but as our listeners are listening and we have a varying age range of listeners, like what do we do with this information? Because they're probably sitting there going, yes, this makes sense. This is where I feel like I am. And so what do we do with this information?
Well, I love the question, do. You didn't ask the question, what do we think about this? What do we do with this? Because we all need to remember that knowledge by itself is the booby prize. Go to your blogs, podcasts, broadcasts, go to Results with Reason, go to other people, think, talk to people, and then put together some sort of a plan. I'm going to go do something. I don't know what it is today, but it's going to be something. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, the bottom line is that if you don't do something different as opposed, triggered by the new thinking, mm-hmm. then you're wasting your time and you're really not rewarding the person who helped you grab the new thinking. Absolutely.
And I know Trevor and I have talked quite a bit about this, where do we stand from a political standpoint too. And I've had emails this week of, hey, could you sign this petition to elect a Democrat, or could you sign this petition to elect a Republican? And I'm like, I don't know. Like what, I know Trevor with my generation and your generation going, we've kind of been dissatisfied with the whole political realm anyways.
Well, and I know I had several friends who their first time to vote was Hillary or Trump. And it kind of seemed like
I'm sorry,
like they've been waiting. Yeah, no, absolutely. It was one of those things where this is neither of these are great options, and we're trying to choose which one has the least amount of negatives. Is how it was perceived, whether that was true or not. And so for a lot of people in my generation, we're in a place now where everything is so partisan. There's no coming across the aisle and making decisions together, no compromise. At the same time that we are trying as young people to find compromise and to find the things that bring us together and to not divide ourselves over things, to have our political system be so dividing that it's really hard for someone like me, I'll just say me, to hear what do we do about this, and we just need to do the little things and not have any idea what that doing is, because I can only do so much research on the people that I'm voting for. I can only do so much activism. There's kind of a disparity for my generation where we aren't in the courthouse yet. We aren't in the House of Representatives or the Senate. And this is what the kids at Stoneman down in Florida are saying. They can't make changes because they're not there yet. And they don't know what the next steps can be for them to make change.
Well, you've heard the phrase, change your thinking, change your life. Well, it results with reason. We believe it's change your thinking, change your actions, change the world. And if you can do that in love while enjoying yourself and the people around you, wow, what a powerful combination. But regardless of age, we can all start with changing our thinking. It isn't just grabbing onto cliches and then holding certain ones to ourselves and taking others and whacking other people over the head with it. What is it that we want as common goals? And I don't care how controversial the subject is. There's bedrock somewhere. There are common goals. And then there are actual facts, not just preconceived notions, that apply to those common goals. Then you take non-agenda-based reasoning. Did I say non-agenda-based reasoning? Apply it to those facts to find a path to realizing those common goals. And when squabbles occur with others or when confusion occurs in your own mind, the touchstone goes back to what are the common goals. And there is bedrock everywhere. I challenge anybody to name a subject where people of any kind of good heart and decent intentions can't find bedrock and then build from there. But it's build, it's do. It isn't just think.
Well, I remind our listeners to go back and listen to the first couple of broadcasts, because we laid the foundation of how do we have a conversation? How do we have a conversation that even if it gets heated or it gets interesting, we don't get defensive and run out with our tail between our legs. And I think you made that come back to the common goals. And I know what I'm thinking right now. I'm wondering if our listeners are thinking, so what do we do when it comes to election time and we have this mindset of, yes, I'm dissatisfied with both extremes and I'm kind of in the squishy middle here. And yet society tells us, or my parents tell us, or whatnot, that we need to just stick with party lines.
We need to find people that we believe, have the right, and introducing a new concept, the right moral compass, the right true north, the right touchstones in their lives. And we are always going to disagree with even the politicians that we feel closest to. There's going to be things where we disagree. We disagree with our spouses. There's an old saying, if two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. But you want to find the person who is running for an office, who has the right touchstones. I keep saying the right moral compass, because that will allow them to get it right far more often than others. Sadly, I find most politicians and a lot of people with whom I have political or financial conversations, they're interested in winning and losing. That you toss around things like libtard or Trumpist. And as soon as I hear those terms in a conversation, my antennae go up, because it looks to me like it's cliches at 20 paces rather than how do we think this through to make better things happen.
Mm-hmm. You have a quote on your blog post about this, political homelessness, And it goes, I started my political life thinking that I was a Democrat. After all, they're the ones that help people, right? Then I thought I was a Republican. They're the responsible ones, right? I really thought that I knew who I was politically when I heard Jimmy Carter say that he was a fiscal conservative and a social liberal. Ah, perfect.
Exactly.
But then it goes into this going between one and another and kind of this change of thinking. And how do we hold that in tension? What's the tension between that? What's the balance between how do we go into ballots this year as a political homeless person and vote on those bedrock things when, to a certain extent, our politics have been highlighting things that aren't bedrock. They've been highlighting things that are kind of extra.
Well, I think we need to start long before the absentee ballot arrives on our kitchen table, finding out who these candidates are, connecting with the different parties, not just the party that's closest to you, saying, here's what I'm looking for. These are the kind of people I want to vote for. These are the type of people that I would contribute cash to. Mm-hmm. These are the people I would ring doorbells for. I see lots of activists out there. My impression is most of the activists are on one side, and they're really not addressing the issues. They're shouting. We need to get people on all sides of the issues who are thoughtful, who have a game plan, who have the interests of people other than just themselves, their community, their country. We need to get them out there, spending time, being active, because our country was born in activism and eventually blood. We can't do it just by talking to each other at the dinner table.
So not to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing you say is, and only this is the
leading the witness.
Yeah, this is the conversation piece here. But what I'm hearing you say is it's almost that we, and I'm going to be really strong with my language here, but we shouldn't have an opinion unless we're willing to do something.
Wow, I like that. I like that a lot. One of my blogs, and it'll become a podcast, is Don't Vote. And it is all about don't vote unless you really understand what you're talking about. Because you don't have an obligation to vote. You have an obligation to cast a well-informed ballot. And informed doesn't mean just asking the person next to you at work, who are you voting for? Or listening to your parents or other people in your family. I mean, this is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make. Vote as if your vote is the only one that counts.
And I want to encourage our listeners and we enter these conversations going, I think it's good to have an opinion, but what are you going to do about it? And I love, Trevor, your generation and a lot of my generation too, and I know, Will, your generation, just the grassroots movements that have really impacted a lot of local cultures. And I would love to see, these grassroots movements really change the national, landscape politically. But I don't know if that's a pie in the sky dream or if that's something that can actually happen.
It's something that absolutely has to happen. And Trevor, I loved when you said, oh my gosh, so many people, their first choice was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Oh, good heavens, right? Doesn't speak well for our democracy. My first choice was Goldwater versus Johnson. A choice, not an echo.
That doesn't date you.
Well,
we won't go back and do the math on that.
Well, yeah, right. Well, you have to go way, way back. I mean, keep turning the pages. How long is this broadcast? But there was a clear choice there, and there were people who lined up on both sides. But I didn't hear very many people saying, "I'm voting against this person, so I'm going to push the other lever."
Yeah.
That push lever that dates me too. People voted for the person. And then like the frog in the boiling water, it got worse and worse and worse. And I was still sitting in the boiling water. You just jumped into it cold.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask, as somebody who has been around for a certain number of years and seen the political climate change, what has been the change? For somebody like me who jumped into the waters, I don't know, back 7 years ago or something, whatever. and it was this way. I didn't see much of the progression the way you did. What was the change, and where are we now in reflection of where we have been?
Well, I think the toss-out answer is less contemplation, less education, less thinking about the vote. Let's go back a little further. Pack, there is a time before me. Go back to the Federalist Papers. Mm-hmm. I know very few people who have read them. They're tough sledding. They're wonderful. They're rich in thought, highly informative. But these were published as a serial in the local newspapers, read by farmers and craftsmen. Mm. This is what they read before they voted. And they were talking to each other in community. And they would listen live to their candidates. And I believe that over time, and this is a continuum, that what's happening is we're just trying to make the political process, oh, good, I'm a Raiders fan, I'm a Broncos fan. When those two teams play, I love one and I hate the other. Mm-hmm. That's what I think is happening in the political spectrum. We're simply choosing up sides. We're not thinking things through. We're not reasoning. We're not doing the hard work of challenging ourselves. We're just choosing sides.
Well, it's interesting that you say that too, because Mark and I have had discussions on this broadcast that our conversations have been that way, where it's I need to be right and you need to be wrong and I need to prove my point, rather than a understanding of both sides, being informed of what's going on. And to see that reflected in our political system makes sense, but I don't know if I've ever thought about it that way.
Well, and I think too, and we can't always blame media, but I think, we have to look at media through a different lens nowadays. And I think also too, it goes back to the fact that the reason we started this broadcast and the podcast is we just don't have these types of conversations anymore to encourage and to spur one another on. And so why wouldn't it be, a hate versus a like, right? Why wouldn't it be the polarization? Because we don't actually sit down and do this. We type on our social media and we email people or we text people and we can say whatever we want because we're not looking at them in the face. But I wonder, if and this is where I really challenge our listeners and I challenge myself and the rest of us in this room going, what would it take to sit down with somebody for coffee that's, the polar opposite from us and have a conversation? We just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, and when I sit down with somebody like that, I have to constantly challenge myself to listen, absorb, and find areas of commonality rather than pretend to listen and set traps. That I have to challenge myself to do.
Exactly. And that's what we're challenging our listeners to do as well as they wade into this. What does it look like to have some of these more enriched but difficult conversations?
Will, how have you found best to be informed for somebody who's starting out totally fresh and is totally on board with the idea of I need to educate myself, I need to know what's going on and what the issues are, but I don't know where to get that information. I don't know where to get that education. Do you know of any good first steps into that?
Find some podcast. This I don't mean this to be self-serving, but find some podcasts that you like to listen to. Go read. Read. Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. Go find some small book somewhere that on these general subjects that captures your imagination. Go back to Cicero. I mean, come on now, don't everybody tune out. Cicero has a lot to say to us today. Take it in small chunks. 15 minutes of reading a day will do amazing, amazing things for your mind, for your relationships. What do you do?
Honestly, I'm guilty of being politically homeless out of inaction. I've not wanted to invest because it's big and scary. And I think there's a lot of my friends who have been in the same place. And so hearing you talk about this, of the solution to political homelessness is action, and in education is encouraging to me because it gives me the next steps to finding where I belong in this political system and as a citizen of the United States.
Well, I want to. I mean, I was there, and I feel like I've grown out of that. But I think part of it is I don't know if we look at this, and Will, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we look at this from a standpoint of I'm going to educate myself politically. I think we need to educate ourselves. Period.
Well said.
And that's where I've taken that stance of I'm going to read 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day at the minimum, if I can, on topics that challenge me and stretch me, that I maybe have a preconceived notion in. I want to change, I want to challenge myself. I don't think we challenge ourselves the way we need to anymore in this society. We get complacent and comfortable.
Yes, and well said. And I think a lot of us, I've had these thoughts in the past, and they're not correct, is that you need to get your thinking right before you start moving. Well, Tony Robbins has a saying, which is motion creates emotion. I thought emotion created motion, and he's right. Think a little, but get moving. And move with the idea of creating new, better things. And you'll find course corrections along the way. You won't find any course corrections until you start moving.
Yeah.
Whether you're moving in the right direction, the wrong direction, right speeds, or the slow speed.
And I hope our listeners have heard from us time and time again, and will continue to hear this. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to do something that you look back on and you say, that probably wasn't the best. And that comes inevitably with acting.
Yes, and failure is fine as long as several things are in place. First of all, you did your homework before you set out and hit your failure. Secondly, you clean up after your failure. And thirdly, you learn from it. And then you're more informed again as you head out to your next either failure or success.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You said it.
We've only got a couple minutes left. Are there any final thoughts on political homelessness?
I really want our listeners to challenge themselves. I think up until this point, our conversations have been good, Trevor, and I think we've eased into that challenging. But we're hitting the ground now. I mean, and we're running.
Yeah. And
really challenging our listeners to begin to challenge themselves in conversations, but also in expanding their perspective.
Yeah.
And I would say that if things are going to change, then it's not up to them to do it. It's up to you to do it. It's up to you. Whoever you is, wherever you are, you're
Thank you
the
for
driver.
joining Candid Conversations.
You're the change agent.
If you would like more information, go to mayfieldcounseling.com/candid conversations and check out our Facebook page, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield.